Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Brian Liddy and it's Thursday the 11th of January. Apologies for the late start this evening. We've had some quite major gremlins in the studio, but we've finally managed to banish them. And the writer, blogger, activist, and as part of Perth and Kinross Yes Hub and great supporter of Broadcasting Scotland, William Duguid, joins us on what is a big news day. Welcome, William.
Good
And
to see you again, Brian.
thank you, and thank you for your patience with us and staying with us all this time. And I was just going to say it's a big news today because Gordon Ramsay has named a new burger after Broadcasting Scotland's Sunday show called The Full Scottish, and we might be able to talk about that at the end of the show as part of the last item. But in the meantime, I'll go on to much more serious business of the Ukraine update, day 687. Two Russian missiles hit a hotel in Kharkiv late on Wednesday, injuring 11 people, one seriously, said the regional governor, Ole Sinabov. Visiting Turkish journalists were among the injured, he wrote. Earlier, a 48-year-old woman was killed and a school partially destroyed in Russian airstrikes against Kharkiv Oblast, Ukraine's state emergency service said. Ukraine is effectively a test site for North Korean nuclear missiles because Kim Jong-un's regime is supplying Russia with rockets that can deliver an atomic bomb, South Korea has said. One of the missiles flew 460 kilometres, the distance from a North Korean launch site to South Korea's city of Busan. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met his Lithuanian counterpart, Gitanas Nausėda, in Vilnius on Wednesday. The surprise visit marked the start of Zelensky's tour of Lithuania, Estonia and Latvia, all former Soviet republics and now EU and NATO members. In a statement on X, previously Twitter, Zelensky called the countries reliable friends and principled partners to Ukraine. In a news conference with Nausėda, Zelensky warned that Western hesitation on aid to Ukraine helps Putin. Zelensky expressed his desire to see action on Ukraine gaining NATO membership at this year's NATO summit, adding that 2024 would be decisive for Ukraine and its allies. A €200 million package of long-term military assistance to Ukraine has been approved by the Lithuanian government. The news was announced after a bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Nausėda on Wednesday. Pope Francis has expressed his concern that international attention is shifting away from the nearly two-year-old Russian war against Ukraine and warned that it risks becoming a forgotten war. An explosive new attack drone has been developed by Iran for Russia's war in Ukraine. The existence of a jet engine-powered version of the Shahed drone has been reported in recent days. Russia accidentally bombed a Russian village, said the UK Ministry of Defence, with inadequate training and crew fatigue among Russian forces likely exacerbating accidents. A majority, that's 63% of Russians, continue to support the full-scale war against Ukraine, according to a poll released by the University of Chicago's Non-Partisan National Opinion Research Centre, or NORC for short. Ukraine's agricultural product exports via its alternative Black Sea corridor reached 4.8 million tonnes in December, surpassing the maximum monthly total exported via a former UN-brokered grain deal, brokers said on Wednesday. Now, I was about to move on to Israel and Gaza's latest, but William, was there anything there that caught your eye?
I think probably the saber rattling that's going on with nuclear weapons is of interest, and particularly the link with North Korea. And I think Mr. Medvedev has been saying a few things about if um, there are strikes on bases with US and allied weapons that could bring a nuclear response, which I think is pretty well just saber rattling, but it's worth noting because the temperature on that score has been turned up a wee bit in recent weeks, and that doesn't seem to be ceasing. Other than that, it just goes on, and the question of how long US support will continue is a live question. I think the Pope is right to be concerned about that. There was a presidential debate last night on the Republican side with Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, and they were split. Nikki Haley is still for supporting Ukraine, but Ron DeSantis not. Of course, the joker in the pack there is Trump. But that's basically it. On we go, I think.
Thank you for that. That's quite fulsome and good additional information for us on Ukraine. Thank you. So Israel's military is killing Palestinians at an average rate of 250 people a day, the highest daily death toll of any other major conflict of recent years, Oxfam has said. In a statement today, Oxfam said it calculated that the number of average deaths per day for Gaza is significantly higher than any recent major armed conflict, including Syria, which was 96.5 deaths per day. Sudan had 51.6 per day. Iraq comes in at 50.8. Ukraine at 43.9, Afghanistan 23.8, and Yemen 15.8. And so just a reminder there that in Israel it's 250 people per day. At least 23,469 Palestinians have been killed and 59,604 injured in Israel's strikes on Gaza since the 7th of October, according to the latest figures by Gaza's health ministry today. Israel has shown chilling and incontrovertible intent to commit genocide in Gaza, the UN International Court of Justice in The Hague has heard. South Africa, which has brought the case, alleged grave violence and genocidal acts by Israel on the first morning of the two-day hearing and called on the judges to order an immediate ceasefire. Israel's foreign ministry has attacked the legal hearing into the war in Gaza, calling it one of the greatest shows of hypocrisy in history. UK Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn has praised South Africa for taking the case to the International Court of Justice. Southern Gaza is turning into a pressure cooker where the majority of people want to flee, the Deputy Director of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees has said. Scott Anderson of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or the UNRWA, said it was a full-time emergency and just 6 convoys to the north of the territory had been granted access since January. Israel's military claimed it has discovered what it described as a vast Hamas tunnel used by the terror organisation to hold hostages under the city of Khan Yunis. The IDF also issued video footage which it claims shows the tunnels. Antony Blinken has told reporters that he found the region to be very focused on the future of Gaza during his trip to the Middle East, which has concluded in Egypt today. The US Special Envoy Amos Hochstein has said he was hopeful diplomacy would calm tensions on the disputed border between Lebanon and Israel. Hochstein, who met with top Lebanese officials after a visit to Israel, said both Lebanon and Israel prefer a diplomatic deal to end hostilities. Iran's intelligence ministry has said the main suspect who planned the 3rd of January Kerman bombing was a Tajik national known by his alias Abdullah Tajiki. Iran has arrested 35 people in relation to the attacks, its intelligence ministry has said. The death toll from the attack has risen to 94. France's naval forces are accompanying ships with French interests through the Red Sea region, the country's top naval commander in the area said on today, adding that Paris's current mandate did not include striking Houthi rebels directly. And finally, the UN Security Council has called for an immediate end to attacks by Yemen's Houthi rebels on shipping. Andrew, I think our next item is we're going to be going in detail onto the South African court case in The Hague. I'm sorry, I've gotten your name wrong again, William. Forgive me. But I think...
Never mind.
No, really, I do mind. We can go in detail into the Hague in the next item, but so was there anything there apart from that caught your eye, perhaps just the scale of the deaths?
The scale of the deaths, which is indicative both of the type of war that's being waged by the IDF, but also indicative of the fact that the civilians have nowhere to go. In all these other conflicts, which had lesser death tolls, they had at least somewhere that they could escape as refugees to, or shelter from the violence. In Gaza, they have absolutely no choice. They're stuck. Um, so that would account for why it's so much higher than any other 21st century conflict death toll. The only other thing I would mention is the aid that's held up, and one is reminded that the UN Security Council did not vote for a ceasefire, but they did vote for a lesser thing, specifically that aid would be allowed in when that was possible. And of course, without a ceasefire, it's not possible. So, to my mind, that was a bit of a waste of time. And so the situation remains dire.
Thank you, William. I'll try not to call you Andrew again. I don't know what's going on there.
Thank you.
But so the next item, at the opening of a case accusing Israel of genocide at the UN International Court of Justice in The Hague today, the court that Israel has shown, sorry, the court was shown chilling and incontrovertible intent to commit genocide in Gaza, with full knowledge of how many civilians it is killing. Israel has described the accusations as baseless. South Africa, which has brought the case, alleged grave violence and genocidal acts by Israel on the first morning of the two-day hearing, amid a febrile atmosphere outside the court in The Hague. It called on the judges to order an immediate ceasefire. It said evidence of genocide was present in the number of civilians killed by Israel and also in statements made by its political and military leaders, including the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In support of its case, it showed photos of Palestinian mass graves, Israeli flags adorning wreckage in Gaza, and what it claimed were videos of Netanyahu expressing support for genocide, as well as troops taking his cue, it alleged, chanting, "No uninvolved citizens." Genocides are never declared in advance, but this court has the benefit of the past 13 weeks of evidence that shows incontrovertibly a pattern of conduct and related intention that justifies a plausible claim of genocidal acts, the South African lawyer Adila Hassim told the court. Her colleague, Timbeka, and forgive me, I'm going to pronounce this name wrong, I'm sure, Nimbeka Nguk, I'm sorry, Tembeka Katobi said that there had been reiteration and repetition of genocidal speech throughout every sphere of state in Israel, such that the evidence of genocidal intent is not only chilling, it is also overwhelming and incontrovertible. Israel, which has denied the allegations, will give its response on Friday. Von Loh KC, part of the South African legal team, said, nothing can ever justify genocide, no matter what some individuals within the group of Palestinians in Gaza may have done. No matter how great a threat to Israeli citizens might be, genocidal attacks on the whole of Gaza and the whole of its population with the intent of destroying them cannot be justified. Blin Gaharla Casey, again, forgive me for mispronouncing that name for certain, said that the international community had repeatedly failed people in Rwanda and Bosnia and in the Rohingya in Myanmar. Lowe told the court, some might say that the very reputation of international law, its ability and willingness to bind and to protect all people, equally hangs in the balance. So William, I've got some more notes here about, people have been saying that they've been crying when they've been watching this as it was streamed live. The Irish lawyer, whose name I pronounced wrongly, outlined, she just used plain language and talked about people being blown to pieces and dozens of children harrowingly being labelled WCNSFs, which stands for Wounded Child No Surviving Family. She said on the basis of current figures, well, we covered figures in the previous item, so I won't go into that. But would you say that those figures that we did cite in the previous item, does it sound to you that this is genocide, and is the South African case going to come out in favour of South Africa?
In favour of with a ruling of genocide. Well, to prove it, they don't need to prove that absolutely everything is genocide. They need to decide, the court does, this is whether some of the alleged acts fall within the provisions of the 1948 Genocide Convention. And it's quite stark about some things, not just the violence that's done, but the starvation and the sort of the punishment of civilians, the punishment of the entire civilians. So it's possible. I think it's quite likely. There is one judge from each side amongst the 17, so it won't be unanimous whatever happens. And of course, it can't be appealed, but also there's no mechanism to make sure that the judgment of the court is enforced. So what is the point, you might ask? Well, the point could be that some countries could then use it as a pretext, a proper pretext, that is, for sanctions against Israel. That might seem to be quite a daring thing for them to do, but it's something that they could do with it. So we'll hear from Israel tomorrow, and then hopefully in a relatively short time, I mean days, I hope, we will hear the judgment of the court. Typically, it takes a bit longer, but what the South Africans have asked for is a provisional, an interim judgment. So that could come within quite a short time. And we'll see what happens after that. I suspect, sadly, not very much. But there you are.
Yeah, thank you, William. You kind of alluded to it in your answer there. The ICJ's rulings are theoretically legally binding on parties to the ICJ, which does include Israel and South Africa, but it's not enforceable. And to give you an idea, that in 2022, the ICJ ordered Russia to immediately suspend military operations in Ukraine, but this was ignored. And it seems that while Israel is unlikely to comply with any order from the court to halt its operations, it likely fears that any such order would be a blow to its international standing. Yeah, is there anything that you'd maybe want to say in response to any of that? Does that?
Um, I, I think there is already a change in Israel's international standing, and that will go on. Whether that is reflected in how governments act is one thing, but how the populations of the world have reacted. There is a sea change and a greater understanding of what's been going on. That is actually my one hope that leads me to think that maybe one day this will be resolved, because the pressure, not just of the governments, but of the populations of the world, might be key. I certainly hope so.
Thank you, William. So I'll move on to the next item, which is in the public inquiry into the post office scandal today. An investigator who helped falsely convict some of the post office operators was accused of behaving like a mafia gangster, seeking to collect bounty with threats and lies. Giving evidence to the inquiry, Stephen Bradshaw, who remains employed by the Post Office, where he has worked since 1978, admitted to accusing one female victim under investigation of telling him a pack of lies during interrogation. He also admitted to signing witness statements testifying to the reliability of the Horizon IT system, which had not been written by him but had been drafted by external lawyers and the head of the Post Office's press office. The Post Office has been accused of maliciously prosecuting the workers, but Bradshaw denied claims contained in the witness statement submitted to the inquiry of bullying behaviour during the interviews he conducted with the accused under the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. A total of 900 post office operators between 1999 and 2015 were convicted of crimes relating to theft, false accounting, and fraud based on faulty information from Horizon, which erroneously suggested that money had gone missing from post office branch accounts. Of those, 95 cases have been overturned in the Court of Appeal, but on Wednesday the government said it would legislate to exonerate all of those involved after a public outcry over the scandal. At First Minister's Questions in Holyrood today, both Douglas Ross and Anas Sarwar asked what involvement the Crown Office had in malicious prosecutions in Scotland. First Minister Humza Yousaf pointed out that the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service were independent and that the Post Office was the responsibility of the UK government. In Scotland, the Crown Office prosecution of accused postmasters relied on evidence provided by post office investigation officers. Dorothy Bain, the Lord Advocate, is expected to make a statement on the matter to the Scottish Parliament next week. So, William, I got myself into a bit of a fankle on this the other night here on Broadcasting Scotland when I hadn't done my research properly in advance, and I hadn't realised that the post office was separate from the Royal Mail. I thought they were both privatised, or it was all privatised at one go by Margaret Thatcher, and none of that is the case. So I'm happy to try and get it right tonight with your help. Is it worth maybe starting out with the difference between the Scottish and the English systems and the way it's arranged? If I was to say something about what I've gleaned on that matter, would that be okay with you?
Yep, go on.
Okay, so in Scotland, up to 100 people were convicted in Scotland due to the faulty Horizon system. The prosecutions were dealt with by the Independent Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service, or COFS, as opposed to the Post Office-led prosecutions elsewhere in the UK. In September 2020, Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission took the unusual step of writing to 73 of those individuals potentially affected by the scandal and encouraged them to refer their convictions to the Commission for review. The Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission Chief Executive, Gerard Sinclair, explained that they were taking that unusual step because they wanted to work out the scale of the problem in Scotland and do whatever they could to address it. He said that many of those affected by Horizon will have had no prior experience of the criminal justice system, and the Commission wanted anyone who had been wrongly convicted to know that a remedy is available. And this week, the Scottish Criminal Cases Review Commission confirmed that they had received 9 applications and 8 are being actively reviewed. And if the Commission concludes that there may have been a miscarriage of justice, then they can refer the case back to the courts for the fresh appeal. Just by the way, more differences with England. The Post Office is one of the oldest private prosecutors going. This is all from the Andrew Tickle article in The National. So Kurt, just want to give him credit here. It dates back to the 16th century. And it retained its coercive powers even after being privatised by Vince Cable in 2011. Yes, I'm going to come on to that. Forgive me, that's the voice in my ear, viewers at home. So in Scotland, the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Service have a monopoly over criminal cases. If organisations like the Post Office believe the law has been broken, they must share their evidence with the public prosecutors who make the final call about whether to prosecute. So that's different to how it is in England, where basically it just lies with the Post Office. But up in Scotland, it's down to the Crown Prosecution Office. I don't want it just to be my voice. Is there anything? And William.
Okay.
Over to you, William.
I know you're getting the voice in your ear again,
yes,
so do you want me to say anything?
Please, yes, I would love you to say something.
Well, there's no question of the Procurator Fiscal Service in Scotland having maliciously prosecuted, because yes, the absolute commonality is that the evidence, the false evidence, was provided by the Post Office, and the Post Office is ultimately responsible for that. In terms of a way forward, I think morally, absolutely the right thing to do is to speed up the process of getting these people falsely convicted exonerated by whatever means that requires. And it's not absolutely straightforward, because it does set an interesting precedent that might not always be a good one, which is that effectively it would be a case of Parliament overriding the courts. And that's a particular danger in England. I don't know what mechanism they will use in Scotland. And there is some disquiet in the legal profession about that. But morally, it's absolutely the right thing to do. And practically, it's the right thing to do, because the criminal justice system is simply not capable of dealing with the number of appeals that would be necessary to get justice in a timely fashion. And it's not entirely clear that everybody who was wronged in this way even wants to get into this again. I mean, you mentioned that only 9 applications had been made in Scotland, of which I think 2 have resulted in the charges being overturned. I think there just needs to be a top-down thing that hits the reset button. I got a voice in my ear saying 2 more today, so that's doubled it. But um, that's where we stand. Now, exoneration is one thing, compensation, or should I say redress, is another thing. But nothing can take away from the fact that these people's lives have been ruined, and all we're doing is giving them a fighting chance of getting onto a level plane again. Some of them will never be the same again. The 61 who have died, including the 4 suicides, that game is over as far as they're concerned. So it's a terrible mess, and I do hope that it can be resolved quickly in a way that does not actually store up more problems for the future, because there is always a danger in doing things quickly, but speed is absolutely what we need now.
It certainly is a tragic state of affairs, and just going back maybe just briefly to the First Minister's questions today, as the item said, both Douglas Ross and Anis Sarwar used the Horizon scandal and tried to point the blame at the First Minister because he was the Justice Secretary at the time. The First Minister hit back by using that very piece of information, which was that the false information that was provided came from the Post Office that led to convictions. He also told the House that the Crown Office for Prosecution issued guidance warning against reliance on that evidence in September 2013 and effectively stopped prosecutions in 2015. He also mentioned that the Post Office is wholly reserved. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but viewers definitely are hearing too much of my voice. I'll move on to the next item if that's okay.
Sure.
Thank you. So the Scottish Government is to introduce tight safeguards on XL bully dogs, which will make it a criminal offence to own the breed without an exemption certificate. The legislation will mirror what has been introduced by the UK Government in England and Wales and will prevent Scotland from becoming a dumping ground for dogs from the rest of the UK. Under the new rules, existing owners will be required to consider whether they wish to keep their dogs. If they do, they will have to apply and pay a fee for an exemption permit. This will require owners to ensure appropriate safeguards are taken for their XL bully dogs, such as muzzling when in public, being on a lead when in public, or taking out insurance and neutering their dogs. In addition, it will be illegal to sell an XL bully dog, abandon a dog, or let it stray or give it away. Subject to parliamentary approval, the Minister for Victims and Community Safety will make a statement to Parliament next week on these new safeguards. First Minister Humza Yousaf said, "We recognise that the vast majority of dog owners are responsible animal lovers. However, now that we know the full implications for Scotland of the UK Government's measures, we are urgently bringing forward new safeguards on XL bully dogs. It is essential Scotland is not adversely impacted because of any loopholes created as a consequence of the introduction of the UK Government's policy in England and Wales. Recent reports of XL bully dogs being moved to Scotland from south of the border are concerning, and it's important we do not become a dumping ground for the breed, leading to unacceptable risks to public safety and animal welfare. We will be working at pace to bring forward necessary regulations to mirror the system introduced in England and Wales as soon as possible. We will continue to engage with stakeholders going forward and to offer practical support to help owners comply with these new safeguards," a spokesperson said. So this also came up in First Minister's questions, William, and it's the tone more or less implied that XL bully dogs had been banned in England outright, and that wasn't the case in Scotland, and that Scotland had missed a beat. But the First Minister did point out that they're not banned in England and more or less applied to these kind of restrictions. So is it just that Scotland's behind the times and is being slow, or has the English legislation created a loophole which we are now having to react to?
Well, I'd rather think it's the latter. I think I'm right in saying that there was no advance notice to the Scottish Government of what the UK Government was intending to do in terms of XL bully dogs. So to say they're behind the times is pushing it a bit, and is just part of the rampant politicisation of every single issue right now between Scotland and England. And that really, really has to stop. It's worth commenting, by the way, that if we were independent, we wouldn't have heard what they were going to do either. But, I think the right action has been taken by Hamza Yousaf and his colleagues, and I think we should just now mirror the English legislation as much as we possibly can, and just get away from talking about missing a beat. Let's just focus on the issue and do things competently as a parliament. I think that's the best outcome for everybody, and I think it is wise, yes, to point out what the status of XL Bully dogs is in terms of there being exemption certificates which require things of the owners to maintain public safety. It's not just a straight out ban because that would be unworkable. So hopefully the legislation that is produced by the Scottish Parliament will be as effective and will be in timely fashion introduced.
Thank you, William. And that is more or less the response that the First Minister gave in Holyrood today as well. So you've kind of chimed with him nicely. So I'll move on to the next item, which is a bomb squad was called to the New York home of the judge overseeing Donald Trump's $370 million civil fraud trial today, hours before the judge was set to hear closing arguments in the case. Police in Nassau County on Long Island said they responded to a security incident at Judge Arthur Engeron's residence at 5:30 a.m. Eastern Time without providing further details. Engeron and his staff have been frequent targets of vitriolic criticism from Trump throughout the case, and his office has been bombarded with death threats. On Wednesday, Trump's legal team and Engeron clashed again over Trump's unusual request to deliver his own closing arguments at the trial. Engeron refused to allow Trump to speak after his lawyers declined to confirm he would not use the opportunity to deliver a campaign speech or impugn myself, my staff, plaintiff's staff, or the New York State court system. Trump is still expected to attend today's hearing. The closing statements come after an 11-week civil trial examining financial statements made by Trump's family business. Forgive me. Engeron has already ruled that the Trump Organization committed fraud and is now assessing what penalty should be levied. So, William, let's see what notes I've got on this. So I was watching an ABC newsreader deliver this item today online, and she had a very wry smile as she said that the judge had revoked permission for Trump to do so after Trump's attorney objected to the fact that he would only be allowed to comment on relevant matters, and also followed up on what we've just said in the report that the president, his sons, and the Trump Organization have already been found liable for fraud, and that the judges will decide the penalty. She thought it would perhaps be hundreds of millions of dollars or even a ban on trading, or also a ban on trading in New York. But I think you're a lot more up to speed about American politics and Trump than I am. What do you think about this?
I don't know what the judgment will be, but I think I'm right in saying that he has actually been in court now, Trump, and surprise, surprise, he made a bit of a tirade about being politically persecuted and, yes, slamming the judge and the prosecutor. It's always a performance with Trump, it really is. But more worrying is um, what his supporters do. And his supporters have been behind a lot of the malice that's been directed and culminated in what looks like a bomb threat against the prosecutor, Arthur Engeron. So the polarization of American politics continues, and you do wonder as 2024 progresses where we go from here, and particularly if Trump is elected. But even if he's not, because can you see him accepting the result if he's not elected? It's a frightening prospect. And both of my sisters live in America, and they'd be very welcome to come back to Scotland. We've got a spare room or two, so we'll be all right. Just come. You might have to.
Thank you, William. Yeah, I was going to go on to that. The fact that it's a bomb squad had to be dispatched to Ingeron's home, it seems very on brand for Trump's MAGA cult. Do you think they've got dog whistles ringing in their ears?
All the time. That's what he works on. Um, he is an expert in manipulating, first of all, in gathering his support and then manipulating it. And he knows all the buttons to push. And he plays the victim card. And so it goes on. And everybody's against him and everybody's right but him. And why stop doing it? Because it works.
Yes. Thank you. So the next item is the Human Rights Watch, the HRW 2024 World Report, has said that human rights across the world are in a parlous state as leaders shun their obligations to uphold international law. In its annual report, HRW warns grimly of escalating human rights crises around the globe, with wartime atrocities increasing, suppression of human rights defenders on the rise, and universal human rights principles and laws being attacked and undermined by governments. The report highlights political leaders' increasing disregard for international human rights laws. The report says selective government outrage and transactional diplomacy and double standards in recognising international human rights laws has put countless lives at risk. Turana Hassan, Executive Director of HRW, said there is a persistent assault on human rights spreading around the world as governments turn away from their legal obligations on human rights for short-term political gains and to seek to consolidate power. She went on to say that there is also a worrying trend of double standards that is not limited to the glaring example of the Israel-Hamas conflict. We see silence on the Chinese government's crimes against humanity, and where there was a full throttle demand for accountability and prosecution of war crimes in Ukraine, there is also silence about alleged US abuses in Afghanistan. The report provides a breakdown of countries' human rights records in 2023. In Afghanistan, women's rights continue to be crushed by the Taliban, and the world has failed to act and prevent wide-scale and horrifying abuses against civilians in Sudan, especially in Darfur. US allies, including Saudi Arabia, India, and Egypt, continue to violate the human rights of their own people with impunity, and the European Union has continued to push back on asylum seekers and refugees and struck deals with Libya and Turkey to return migrants trying to reach Europe. The report also strongly condemns the UK government for what it terms a dismal year for human rights, with a continued assault on fundamental rights such as the right to protest and seek asylum. William, are you surprised to see the UK government mentioned in that report?
No, the restraints on the right to protest have been a big issue and will go on being a big issue because there's a lot for people to protest about just at the moment. In also restraining people's apparent right to seek asylum by creating categories of illegal asylum and the like. They're probably we step ahead of the EU, but not very far, because the whole of the EU is pushing back to an extent against asylum seekers and trying to stop them before they get really too far into the land mass. And this is a problem because it's inevitable that we're going to have a lot of movement in the world over the next few years, that people are going to be stretched and people are going to need their human rights respected because they're just going to be trying to survive and get on with their lives. And it seems to me that as times grow hard, governments grow harder and make it more difficult for people. And I'm not at all surprised by what the Human Rights Watch has been saying. I don't know what we do about it apart from change all our governments. And I know it's an election year in many, many countries, but it seems that one lot is as bad as the next. And so there has to be a sea change at some point if we're to survive and get on as a species. And I look forward to that.
Thank you, William. This item kind of chimes with one that I read out the other day here on Broadcast in Scotland. Of course, I won't be able to remember or recall the name of the report or the organisation, but they said that it'd been proven that a mistake for left-wing governments to shift to the right in order to try and attract right wing votes, because what it did was the people that vote right wing, they're never going to change their mind anyway, and all it does is alienate the people that you should be trying to get to vote for you, which is people with left wing socialist tendencies. And is that kind of, is there something, is there a connection there, do you think, somewhere?
Um, Possibly, because the political spectrum does tend to move. It seemed to me that what you've just read there, or what you've just recollected, is a description of what the Labour Party is doing. By the way, it's just moving into the space vacated by the Conservatives as they drift off towards the extreme right into reform. Uh, Reform, no doubt, will be willing to accept the remnants of the Conservative Party when it's torn apart at the UK election later this year. Um, Maybe the pendulum will swing the other way at some stage, and we'll start sort of finding ways of getting on with each other again. But sometimes these things have to get quite extreme before they can be fixed. Things get worse before they get better.
Yes, you mentioned the upcoming general election. Let's just hope that Broadcasting Scotland can raise enough funds to still be here to cover that when it happens. But I'll move on to the next item. A hub for facilitating knowledge exchange between international development partner countries and the Scottish renewables sector has formalised partnerships in Malawi, Zambia and Rwanda. The Scottish Government Global Renewables Centre, the GRC, hosted online at the University of Strathclyde and funded by the Scottish Government, offers networking, shared learning and resources that enhance global citizenship and enables increased deployment of sustainable energy. Strathclyde's new partners are the Renewable Energy Industry Association of Malawi, the Zambia Renewable Energy Association, and the Energy Private Developers Association in the government's three African International Development Partner countries. Damien Frame, GRC Programme Manager at Strathclyde, said engagement with stakeholders in Scotland, Malawi, Zambia and Rwanda has been extremely positive. There is common recognition of the current need to accelerate energy access, and our mapping identified clear opportunities for shared learning between all four countries, each bringing unique areas of experience and expertise. The Scottish Government Energy Secretary Neil Gray said, ensuring we develop a global energy system that provides affordable, reliable and clean energy for everyone is vitally important, so that we can capitalise on the economic and social benefits that our renewable energy capabilities can provide. Scotland, he went on to say, Scotland has an important role to play in the global energy transition, not just in the production of renewables, but in sharing skills, knowledge and innovation to help accelerate the energy transition both at home and further afield. He continued, we also recognise the importance of continuing to be a good global citizen and contributing to sustainable international development in partner countries such as access to clean energy. I look forward to these partnerships between Scotland, Malawi, Zambia and Rwanda, supporting the continuing growth of renewable energy and the multiple benefits it provides. The organisations in each country will design and deliver a series of in-person and virtual knowledge exchange events in collaboration with Strathclyde University. So, William, I did a wee bit of digging because I know that Scotland's got a long history of working with Malawi. A partnership apparently that began in 1859, and I think back then it would probably have been, um, I'm assuming, about Scotland helping to provide clean water to an African country, but now we're working in collaboration and on equal footing about providing clean energy. And I thought this was interesting because usually you would expect to see Scotland being named alongside the likes of Iceland and Norway, but here we have Rwanda even. What do you think of this?
I think, I mean, your report pretty well ticked all the boxes. It is being a good global citizen. It's about Scotland's ambitions to be in the forefront of renewable energy in the world, all parts of the world. And more than production, it's about skill sharing and getting the very best for everybody. And proving itself to be a good partner, which is always a good sort of rehearsal for ultimate independence. I dare say there'll be some unionist parties that hate the very idea of this kind of partnership. Well, sorry, get rid of the cringe. This is the future, and it's the right thing.
Thank you, William. And it also just occurred to me, I think I've said on here many times that people talk about Scotland being rich in wind and down the line tidal energy, and we'd be hopeless at solar because we don't have enough sunshine. But actually, you don't need like strong sunshine to make use of solar. You just need daylight, which of course we have here as much as any other country in the world. But I would expect that those African countries, and I don't want to sound what's the word, sort of stereotypical, but I expect that they will be stronger in when it comes to solar, and they have coastlines, obviously, but it seems like quite a good mix in terms of we've
Yeah,
all got different makeups of what our strengths are.
yeah. It's important to look at the thing in all its aspects, and this gives Scotland the opportunity to be part of um, dealing with the best solution for everybody in whatever country they happen to be in.
And a relationship Scotland's going to be able to have with Rwanda that seems to be lacking when it comes to Westminster. But maybe,
Ah, well, that word Rwanda, yes.
yes,
I
sorry, moving on. So, a new diagnostic pathway for head and neck cancer will help ensure patients have cancer ruled in or out faster. Scotland's Head and Neck Optimal Cancer Diagnostic Pathway, designed by clinical experts, sets out a new model for NHS Scotland to deliver an effective and efficient service. This will allow resources to be targeted at patients with cancer, removing non-cancer patients from the pathway early, and improve the quality, safety and effectiveness of care. Head and neck cancers are relatively uncommon, although incidence rates have increased gradually in the last 10 years, with around 1,300 cases in Scotland diagnosed each year. Head and neck cancers encompass more than 30 areas within the head and neck, including the mouth, lip, tongue, and nose. The new pathway sets dedicated timeframes for each step of the diagnostic process to enable diagnosis by day 30 and treatment to start by day 62. It was developed through the Centre for Sustainable Delivery, the CFSD, which is a national unit designed to sustainably improve and transform Scotland's healthcare system. Health Secretary Michael Matheson said, "Following considerable engagement from clinical teams across NHS Scotland, I am pleased to see the publication of Scotland's Head and Neck Optimal Cancer Diagnostic Pathway." He went on to say, as set out in our recently published cancer plan, cancer remains a national priority for the NHS and Scottish Government. This new gold standard pathway will enhance the efficiency of head and neck cancer services and provide improved experiences and outcomes for patients. The Scottish Government's Detect Cancer Early programme has provided around £1.8 million of funding to support implementation of the new pathway. Boards will use the money to realign services so patients can receive multiple tests, where clinically appropriate, at the one time. That reduces their visits to hospital and speeds up the time to diagnosis. So, William, for me, there was two things here. One is that it seems this is a good example of the Scottish Government doing the day job, but the other is I hadn't really thought of it as a better use of resources, I suppose, that the quicker you can eliminate someone and tell them that they don't have cancer, then it frees up more time further down the line for those people who sadly do have a diagnosis of cancer. So it's going to quicken things up.
Yeah, well, one of the things the NHS Scotland specialises in is finding ways of doing more with less. It's actually fairly good at that, and this, I think, is an example of it. And it comes against the background of the report yesterday from the Less Survivable Cancers Task Force that had the survival rates, the 5-year survival rates for UK generally. I mean, that includes Scotland, but I don't know what the differences would be between England and Scotland. But the UK's ranking as a whole was really pretty low on all the categories. And so anything that any of the health services in the UK can do to improve matters, and importantly, to have a plan, because one of the things the Survival Task Force was speaking about was lack of planning. Well, the Scottish Government has a plan. It is doing the day job in that regard. It's got a 3-year plan from last year through to 2026, and this is right in the middle of it as one of the aims that they mentioned early on. So it's good to see it coming about. I hope the funding is adequate because it's not very much funding. Funding is still a bit limited, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
Thank you, William. So this is our final item, and projects from the borders to the Outer Hebrides are being awarded grants of up to £5,000 to help to promote food products from their region and establish new markets. Food festivals, food and drink trails, markets and online shops are among the 22 local and collaborative projects to receive support from the latest round of the Scottish Government's Regional Food Fund. The fund, managed by Scotland Food and Drink, aims to support regional growth by providing support for projects to promote and sell products from their areas. A fourth round of funding opened last October with a total of £100,000 available. Rural Affairs Secretary Marie Goujon visited the Aberdeen Business Improvement District, which has received a grant to promote Aberdeen Restaurant Week, a campaign to increase footfall and spend on local food and drink in the city. Ms Goujon said, "Scotland has some of the best food and drink in the world. The industry is worth £15 billion to our economy, supports thousands of jobs and businesses, and is a success story at home and internationally. But there is no doubt that the sector has borne the brunt of an array of significant challenges in recent years and has repeatedly had to respond and adapt as a result. The Regional Food Fund is providing much needed support to local businesses, producers and community groups to showcase the best products that their regions have to offer. To date, over £750,000 has been awarded to 160 projects across Scotland." She went on to say that the fund is part of our wider Good Food Nation plans to improve the availability of local, high-quality food, whilst also ensuring our food industry continues to grow in a way that is profitable and sustainable. So, William, again, I don't want to, at the risk of trivialising this subject, because it is a serious one post-pandemic, this sector has struggled, and there's Brexit is putting pressure on the food and drink market as well, isn't it? But to go back to that thing that I started the show with, that Gordon Ramsay's named a new burger after our Sunday show, The Full Scottish. Do you think he would be eligible for any of this funding?
Um, I doubt that he would need any of the funding, but if he's any, I, I don't know even whether he lives in Scotland these days, but maybe he does.
He's got,
I
he's
wonder
got
if maybe he would be prepared to put some money Broadcasting Scotland's way in payment for the full Scottish name. That would be super. I'm not sure if you have it trademarked, but hey, it might be worth it. It's great to see again a plan and a regional food fund to try and sort things out with the food industry, which has got so much track record and so much potential, but has really struggled, as you say, through Brexit, through energy costs, through COVID, through business rates need looking at, and also the difficulty in getting staff. So if Gordon Ramsay can come to that party and help others out, that would be really great. But a good thing, a good thing.
So, thank you. But I mean, I always run the risk of lowering the tone in this programme, but for which I apologise. But just for the record, Gordon Ramsay, he has a new restaurant in Edinburgh, and it's not very. Yeah, check it out online, and you'll see for yourself.
Uh-huh.
Um,
But check out the several small producers as well, because they do lots.
Yes, and if I can maybe be a bit cheeky, so we started late, and so we're kind of 5 minutes off the hour. Can I maybe? There is a couple of things that was hoping to use when we were talking about the Horizon scandal that I don't think we managed to cover. Would you be able to spare a minute to kind of go over them now?
Go on, let's
You
find out
sure?
what they are.
Well, just a couple of minutes then. So first of all, I don't think we covered the First Minister in First Minister's question. He agreed that the quickest way for the Scottish Parliament to resolve the situation and for justice to be made was to extend the Westminster legislation to include Scotland. He was being challenged by both Douglas Ross and Anna Sarwar to do that, and he said that that will probably may well be the case. The second thing that I don't think we maybe got across very clearly was about the Lord Advocate Dorothy Baines' role role in all of this. Again, there were lots of calls for her to go to Holyrood and to give a personal statement and answer questions in the chamber. And the First Minister made the observation that really that she had told him that she was willing to do whatever was appropriate, whether it was going to be a briefing or to appear in the chamber, and that would be for her to decide, and that the Scottish Government couldn't force her. Is there anything in there that you can maybe unpack for us?
Well, just that you've got to keep the actual arm of justice separate from too much parliamentary interference. So I think the caution with regard to Dorothy Bain is absolutely right. In terms of extending the Westminster legislation to cover Scotland, it had better be drafted by somebody that knows Scotland. That's all I would say, because um, it wouldn't be the first time that legislation had been drafted that it included Scotland, but messed things up in some way, and that would be a shame if that happened.
Thank you. That's a good observation. And also, just one last point that's just popped into my head. And again, during First Minister's questions, it was brought up by the opposition leaders that Humza Yousaf had been the Justice Secretary when the Horizon scandal was kind of unfolding down south. And they kind of implied that he should have done more. But he rejoined her by saying that really, that again, it's a completely devolved situation. The Post Office, as we said, have got their own prosecution services since the 16th century. It wouldn't have been right for him to wade in. What do you think? Who was right there?
Well, did anybody write to Hamza Yousaf as Justice Secretary asking him to get involved? Because in England, they did write to the Justice Secretary, who was at the time Ed Davey, and he, for a while anyway, declined to get involved. And that's something that he should answer to for sure, if we're going to start getting personal about it. But it's quite possible that nobody wrote to Hamza Yousaf because it wasn't his problem. It was a devolved issue. And, therefore, Ed Davey was the person who should have been dealing with it. It just seems pointless raking all this nonsense up. And it's, again, as I say, typical of the way that the opposition in Scotland, and sometimes encouraged by some of the mainstream broadcasters, conduct themselves. And it really needs to stop.
Thank you, William. I think thanks to you, we finally have done some justice to that incredibly tragic miscarriage of justice. So thank you once again. Also, thank you for staying late this evening and your patience with us at the beginning of the show.
I'll hand your apologies to my wife.
Please do. So that's it for this evening. But before I go, again, I'm just going to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on your generosity. So to everyone who has donated and to all the supporters who have signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. We now urgently need to raise at least £10,000 to pay our bills within the next few days. We have already raised over £2,000 thanks to your generosity. I'm just being told it's actually £2,500. So again, we're a quarter of the way there. So thank you once again. And I'm told the voice in my ear tells me that we've got 4 days to go. Please please do your best to try and help us raise the remaining funds. If we're able to pay the bills and keep the lights on, just donate what you can. So good night and thank you for watching.